Okay, this episode was good, but where was Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson? Because this episode had boxing, and we all know that you can't have boxing in Star Trek without Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Look, I don't make the rules, that's just how it is. Hello interwebs, I hope you're doing well because it is wonderful to finally be back reviewing Star Trek Discovery after its month-and-a-half sort of mini hiatus, and we are back for Season 4, Episode 8, All In. Now, as per usual, I'm going to go into my spoiler-free thoughts for all of you in just a minute, and then I'll get into spoilers after that. But I just want to quick address two quick little things. The first thing is just for folks who may not know that between the last episode of Discovery and now this one, they actually were releasing episodes of the show Star Trek Prodigy week to week, the sort of Nickelodeon kids show. And I did review each and every one of those episodes, and you may have missed them because they weren't on this channel. They were actually on my secondary channel, Jessiegender After Dark. So if you're looking for those reviews, they're over there along with other sort of news, reviews, reactions that I do over on that channel. And my second thing is actually kind of along those lines, because while most of my news, reviews, and reactions went over to my secondary channel to keep this channel sort of my main premiere content, my bigger video essay, more thoughtfully written, scripted out content that I put more effort and time into, I had decided to keep most of my main big Star Trek reviews on this channel because I wanted them to get the most, viewership on them, people to see them, that sort of thing. But I did notice a distinct dip in listenership compared to my video essays with my Star Trek Discovery reviews earlier this season. And so with that being said, I do want to keep the reviews on this channel, but it does really help me out if you like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff off of this video. Otherwise, I may have to migrate it over to the other channel just to sort of keep my place in the algorithm and not hurt myself in the algorithm with lower performing content. I don't want to do that, and don't worry, I'll always be doing reviews of Star Trek Discovery, but it's just something that I have to be open about that might have to shift just to help me with the algorithm. That's not something I want to do. Hopefully that doesn't have to change. So if you can like, comment, and share these reviews, they do really help me out, especially in the algorithm, especially with this content that may be struggling a little bit more. But either way, I'll still be reviewing no matter what. I'll let you know if I do have to shift over to the other channel. It's just a heads up that I would like to keep it here, but that requires some, changing in how this video has been performing. And if it doesn't, I'm going to just have to shift it. And that's not on any one of you, but it would help if you can. But with that stuff out of the way, let's get into the spoiler-free review, because All In, this episode, was a fan-freaking-tastic return for Star Trek Discovery. And it continues the trend that I saw at the beginning of this season, with this season being easily the best of this show so far. This episode just continues to show me that Discovery has found its voice, found its confidence, found a way to tell stories that feel Star Trekian but still also feel uniquely Discovery at the same time. And that is by honing in on these characters and their relationships and starting to explore them more in really interesting and thought-provoking ways. And that really showcases itself within the characters of Book and Burnham this episode. After Book's choice at the end of last episode, it was really awesome to see Burnham really struggling with that throughout here, and her conflicts with Book as they come up throughout the episode are fantastic, well performed, and yet I really love that you can still see the chemistry between Sonequa Martin Green and David Ajala playing these characters, even when they're on opposite sides. Like, even when they're against each other ideologically, they still make like sparks fly in their relationship in really wonderful ways. You can tell that they have caring for each other, and they just really, really work. And I loved the way that the writers chose to test this relationship by having a really fun episode that was kind of like a casino gambling episode, where Burnham and Book kind of return to their old life as couriers that they were in season 3, and they have to kind of go underground into the smuggling underworld of the Star Trek universe that we definitely have seen throughout all forms of Star Trek, from Harry Mudd in the original series all the way to Deep Space Nine and things like that with Quark's Bar. And I liked that return here, and it was just so much fun. We got boxing, we got poker games, we got really magnanimous and like very affable smugglers a la Quark. It was just a lot of fun, and there was also a ton of fun Easter eggs that didn't just feel like, oh look, here's this cool little thing. There were like some fun aliens that pop up in this episode that had me going, ooh, that's so cool. We haven't seen them. I wonder what they're doing now at this point in canon. Sadly, a lot of questions, not a lot of answers. It was just a potpourri of everything that I love about this show and about Star Trek in general, but doing it in a unique way that even Discovery hasn't done before. But even within that, it still manages to hone in on what this season has really spoke to me about with mental health, about finding connection, about finding each other within all of that. There's some wonderful stuff for Stamets and Hugh this episode as well that is a lot shorter and attention paid to it, but still feels like it's really hitting that mental health discussion that has been really well developed throughout this entire season, especially with Hugh, but with all of our characters. And at the end of the day, I think the only knock that I can have against this episode is because this episode was so individually focused and had its own unique vibe and sense to it because of the casino planet, that it paid slightly less attention to the big mystery DMA stuff going on here and the aliens behind it that we were getting into at the end of the last half of the season. And I'm still interested in that, and they've made me interested in that. And this episode kind of proves to me, though, the format that I really wish Discovery will take going forward, in that while they can have this big overarching story if they feel the need to, I'm really gelling more with the individual plots of every episode rather than episodes that push forward the bigger plot in a larger way. I just love having fun with these characters, and this episode was finally one that was just we're gonna have fun with Book and Burnham, and yes, it'll tie in the major plot, but it's just gonna be kind of a fun time for our characters and test them in interesting ways, but it's just a joy to watch. And so I really appreciate that. And then the final thing too is I also really like that our minor characters like Owo get something to do. We've been complaining for all season that we wanted the bridge officers to get more to do. They finally get some to do here, specifically Owo, and it was just a lot of fun to see that. So on all those fronts, everything that I just said, this was a top-notch, probably going to end up in one of my favorites, if not of the season of Discovery in general so far. And I really hope that they can keep this trend going because this episode was just fantastic. But with all that being said, I gotta nerd out for a little bit about this episode, so we're gonna talk about that in spoilers. So if you have not seen the episode, pop off here, because Jessie's gonna nerd out for a little bit at you. Alright, we are now officially in the spoiler section, so I'm gonna go through the episode as per usual, bit by bit, scene by scene, and just talk out the stuff that I really loved. We start off the episode with the president calling in Vance and Burnham to sort of chew them out for Book getting away with a spore drive with Tarka. And I loved this scene with the president just being on the ball, pissed off and calling them out, saying you didn't know anything about this, did you? And then they say yes. And it's well, then how the hell did you not know anything about this? They were screwed either way. And you really felt that. And I also like the president saying Burnham, you're too close to this. You need to be pushed out of this. Starfleet will deal with it. You go deal with, this first contact mission that is now in jeopardy because of your boyfriend. It just, again, proved to me how strong a character this president is, and I just love every scene that she's in, and I'm really enjoying her development this year. Then we get a scene with Tarka and Book where they're sort of talking out what they need to do. It looks like they need to get some element called isolinium, which feels like unobtainium in terms of its name, that they need to go and obtain in order to follow through with their plan to take out the DMA. But this scene also subtly reinforced these two characters and their distinct point of views. Yes, they're trying to do the same thing, but Tarka still has this sense of ego to him because he's constantly making excuses we'll be fine. Even when we do this, the ends will justify the means and the president will get us off and get a pardon. And Book's very much realistic. He is willing to face the music on this. I'm doing what I have to do and I'm willing to own up to it when we're done with it. And so I liked seeing this subtle shift between these two, that Book is being a very selfless person, even if he's making a very horrible mistake. And Tarka still has that very, rich boy, Elon Musk kind of self-assuredness, I'm smarter than everyone else sort of vibe to him, that I think just distinctly puts him more on the villainous side of things, even though I don't think he's an out-and-out villain. I actually appreciate that as for his character, too. Then we get a really wonderful scene where we have Vance come into Burnham, and I really loved this scene for showing Vance having some vulnerability. Vance has been a character who, while we've seen him have issues here and there, he's generally been this stalwart guy, the sort of pinnacle of Starfleet admiralty, one of the best admirals that Starfleet's had. If you know the history of Starfleet's admirals, he's definitely up there with Admiral Ross and Forrest as one of the good ones. But this scene just showed his vulnerability, how he believed in Tarka, and yet he still feels like there's something off here, and he almost chalks it up to Tarka's ego, but he says there's something else going on here. And while we got hints of that last episode, we know Tarka has some love going on. I do have some thoughts about that, and we'll talk about that later on in here. So I have some thoughts about maybe Tarka's motivation in terms of that partner that he's trying to get back to in that alternate universe that he mentioned last episode. But then Vance puts Burnham in between a rock and a hard place where he asks her to try and look for a book while also doing this sort of first contact stuff for the DMA. Which I appreciated because this is the second time that Burnham has been asked by one of her superiors to sort of follow the letter of the law, but kind of do their own thing without them actually being told to do so. And it's really interesting how Burnham's constantly put in this place where she has to skirt the line and be sort of the rogue officer, but kind of under approval. And I wonder if that's going to come back to bite her, that she's constantly the person that these people trust to do that, but she can't always do the right thing in these situations. So I'm curious how they're building that out, how she constantly is having that pressure put on her. Then we get a quick little explaining scene with Stamets, who says that they need some star charts from this alien race called the Stilf that may have some information about the aliens outside the galactic barrier, and Burnham decides that she can go and use a broker in order to find these star charts instead of going all the way to the edge of the galactic barrier to do so. But Saru quickly calls out, like, I know what you're really up to, and I like that Burnham just trusts him immediately, that she doesn't try to hide it from him, that she's earned that trust with Saru. Like, way back in season 1, this would not be something that Burnham would have told Saru, and I like that they are open enough and he trusts her enough to, have that trust between the two of them. So a nice little scene between the two. Then we have Book going to meet his old contact, Haas, with Tarka to obtain this element that they're looking for. And Haas, he's a character that appears throughout this episode, and I'll just briefly talk about him here. He was fantastic. Everything about him was lovely. Yes, he's sort of like the casino boss kind of guy, but he was just like very kind and sweet. He has wonderful moments where like he pulls Burnham aside at one point and says like, look, I'm not one to talk about love, but I really hope it works out between you two. He uses they, them pronouns at certain points in the episode too, which just for me made me very pleased. I liked that. He also had some wonderful lines like when you're stumbling about like a Klingon in the disco, which was also really funny. And so just his character just generally was a wonderful addition to the Star Trek universe. And I really hope we get to see him again because I had a ton of fun with him. But Book goes to talk to him, and obviously he has some old history with this guy, and so he takes all of his latinum and they need to earn it back. And so Book says, well, they can try and sniff out some of the cheaters in your casino in order to help you out, and that can maybe get us this element. But then we shift over to Burnham, who comes into the casino planet with Oo. And I really, again, as I spoke about in my spoiler-free section, I loved this because I like that Oo was getting some chances to shine here, and I like that Burnham brought her along with her, connecting to that thing that we saw a couple episodes ago where Oo sort of wanted to do something, but Saru sort of knocked her down and she apologized, and Burnham's like, I understand that feeling. And so that's why they sort of went together. And I just really like that. And it's also not for nothing. I hate to chalk things up to just representation, but it's just like two black women on the screen sort of talking to each other, not talking about like men or other people, just their own feelings. That's just really cool to see that representation on screen. And that sort of like, I believe there's like I forget what it's called, but there's a Bechdel test for black characters and black women characters as well that I forget who created it, but someone created that sort of idea, and this definitely passes that, and I think that's really, really cool. Again, that's just like base level, representation. We should have more of this, but again, I think it was just cool to see. Then we get sort of like fun casino stuff going on here because Burnham shows up. She tries to convince Haas to give her the isolinium. He says, you can't, you need to pay me a crap ton of money. So Oo goes all in and just enters the ring in order to try to win this money for them. And I love seeing Burnham as like the hype woman for Oo. So he's like, oh wow, Owusha-kun, like fighting this dude. And they're kind of playing it up. And I wonder too, it does seem legit like Oo is just legitimately losing, but they do get called out later on that they were hustling. And I wondered if that was the intention, that Ovo was playing it down, because when she beats this guy and she punches him right in the balls and just knocks him out, I was like, damn, whoo, Ovo can take him down. I loved it. I literally was like, ooh, that was just painful to watch the entire time. And that was just a lot of fun. But then we also get Tarka trying to sniff out these like people cheating with their blinky eyes. And I liked that it turned out that the person cheating was a changeling. And this can have like a ton of implications for us. Like, is this a changeling from the Dominion? I'm really curious, because what does that mean for the Dominion at this point? Are there like runaway changelings like we saw every once in a while, like Odo and a couple others in Deep Space Nine? Or are they from the Founders and maybe they broke up or something like that after so many years? So many questions about this. It also could just be a changeling from a completely different background and race. We've seen a few other changelings throughout Star Trek, not just the Founders. So it just has me a lot of questions, and I liked seeing that. And before that plot gets wrapped up, we also have a couple good scenes between Book and Burnham where they really are trying to change each other's minds, and like Burnham gets offended that Book chose to do this, that he wasn't convinced by Tarka, that he went to Tarka for it. And I just, these wonderful scenes between Burnham and Book were just so good, especially when they helped each other out, when Burnham almost gets stabbed by the guy and Book saves her, and then Burnham helps Tarka and them catch the changeling, with the changeling turning into a little tribble to get away, was also a little bit of fun. It just showed me that even when they're against each other, they just work together so well. So when at the end of the episode, when Book chooses not to side with Burnham, it's even the more heartbreaking. And it's just so well written to just show, even in these scenes, how well these two are together to just rip it apart. Fantastic job throughout this. Also in the middle of this, we get a really quick scene between Stamets and Hugh, where Hugh is stress cleaning, and believe me, I got that feel. I've done more than my share of stress cleaning quite a lot. And I like that Stamets sort of calls Hugh out. It's like you have too much of your identity wrapped up in your work, because Hugh feels this guilt for failing Book. Like he should have known it was coming, but you can't put that on yourself. Book's a grown man who makes his own choices. And as Stamets points out, you can't, you can only help them come to their own understandings. You can't decide for them. And I like that. It goes back to the stuff that we've been seeing with Hugh, that he's just putting too much into his work at all times and too much of his identity into his work at all times. Again, I think a lesson that many of us in the pandemic can learn from, but especially for therapists during this time, I feel like it has to have been even more hard to deal with that. And so seeing that reflected in Hugh, just really a good job here. And I like that Stamets goes on the holodeck and they walk through a gay field of roses together. It was just nice to see that. And another good scene for the husbands together, because I feel like the past few seasons we haven't gotten a ton with them together, and I really love just seeing them work as as partners in this episode. It was just very sweet to see. Then, because both Burnham and Book paid off their debts to Haas, they are able to go into a poker game to try to win the element. And there's a cool little moment where Burnham knows her rocks, and she looks at the piece and she sticks a tracker on it, as we later learn in the episode. And then we get a fantastically fun poker game. I want those cards, by the way. That deck of cards looked really, really cool. It looked very snazzy. But the poker game was just a lot of fun. And again, showcasing Burnham and Book working together to try and defeat these Emerald Chain wannabes. And again, showing how well they work together. Burnham also playing up her emotions and trying to read the room and things like that was just a real joy to just see Sonequa Martin Green just playing it up. And it's moments like that I really love the show for, when characters get to and actors get to just break the mold and just have fun. You can really feel that the actors are just enjoying themselves, and Sonequa was just really pleased to be playing this. You could just tell. And it was just so much fun to watch. And again, made it all the more heartbreaking when Book chose not to side with Burnham and won the game in the poker match. And it was just, and then they escape and head out. There was also a quick little scene here with Tarka and Owo that I really also enjoyed. Again, Owo getting some more to do and getting some scenes, and I liked her sort of calling out Tarka's ego, but Tarka's sort of saying, no, this has more to do with my love, and if you had love that I had, you would go all out for it. Which has me wondering, they're really playing up this, Tarka wants to get back to his long-lost lover. I thought it was just going to be a weird explanation backstory, but it's so specific, and it's come up so much, then I'm really curious who this person is going to turn out to be, because I feel like that's what they're building towards, that whoever this person Tarka is in love with has to be important. And I have two theories, and both of them are weird, but they're the only things I could think of. My one explanation is that the person that Tarka fell in love with, given his ego, is he fell in love with an alternate universe version of himself. So the person he fell in love with is himself, which would fit this guy, and would be just so telling of all this emotion that he has wrapped up in it. That might be a bit much though for this show. It might be a bit too on the nose for the character, but I'm curious to see, given that we have a call out of an alternate dimension, that maybe that is the case. The second option might be interesting in that it might be, finally, Prime Timeline Lorca. Obviously, we never got to see Prime Timeline Lorca outside of a little reference in one of the Star Trek Discovery novels that came out. We learned that he was still alive in that book. And so we never really got to see where Lorca ended up. It's quite possible he got sent into the future, because we never really got to know. And so he might be in the future. And I know some people may balk, Mirror Universe Lorca clearly had a thing for Burnham, so he's not into dudes. But number one, Lorca can be bisexual. Number two, we've also seen that people from different timelines can have different sexualities, as we've seen with, George O and Mir Stamets as well. So it might be that he is gay or bisexual in this universe. So I'm curious if that might be the case. That one might be a little bit more of a stretch, but it might be a way to bring Jason Isaac's Prime Timeline Lorca that we never got to see back into Discovery, and that's something that fans have been clamoring for. So I'm curious if this might be a play at doing that. It would require a lot of explanation to get us there, but it's also very possible. But with that said, Burnham is sadly the loser, and she returns back to Starfleet, and I like that the president again calls her out on this, but Burnham says that she knew she was going to lose, so she placed a tracker, and that's how they're able to go after Book, hopefully in next episode. But we do get one last big reveal at the end of the episode here, with Burnham going to check on Stamets' research, and we find out that the aliens that made the DMA have this big, huge solar system-sized Faraday cage thing that they are using and requires a ton of power, and that this whole DMA was actually their dredge to try and get this specific element that they needed to power everything. And so if this was just their mining equipment, as Vance says, I wonder what their weapons are going to be like. And it just clearly shows they are an incredibly powerful alien race. And so I'm really curious to see what this all means and where they're going for this, because I have to say, my interest, if Starfleet's going up against this big of an enemy, like this big of a threat, that they can do these big things, I'm really curious to see what that's going to look like going forward and how dangerous they can possibly be, and if they may or may not tie into prior established Star Trek canon. I'm fine with either way, but I'm curious to see if they'll tie it into something bigger, like maybe they're the people that made the Dyson spheres from way back in Star Trek The Next Generation, or some other sort of random Star Trek mystery that we've seen, like the Doomsday Machine from back in the original series. It's all on the table as possibilities, which will be curious to see if they tie that in or not. But that does bring us to the end of the episode. I have to say, I had a lot of fun with this one. It was just, again, a fun, unique twist on a Star Trek episode. We get to see the underbelly casino world, and yet still drilling down into our characters, the actors having a lot of fun to do, and still having focus on the overall season story arc, as well as these smaller moments. And again, this proves to me that the things that really excite me about the series are the characters, the focus on mental health, and like when this show really gets to have a individually focused plot of its own, rather than always being in service of the larger story arc. So I really hope that continues to be the case with the season going forward, because I am very excited for the rest of the season if this is the standard being set. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it all on to you. I would love to hear your comments down below on this episode and more. I'm also very excited to be reviewing more Star Trek going forward. Obviously, I'll be doing Discovery reviews either on this channel or my other channel, depending on how things go. Again, I'll let you know how that turns out. But we also got Picard, Strange New World, more Prodigy and Lower Decks on the way. Just a crap ton of Star Trek coming. So I'll be here for all of it. But until then, I wish you all live long and prosper, my friends.